Today we're welcoming Wendy Fredrickson to complete her presentation on Sig Paulson's book, The 13 Commandments. The first lesson is available on our Facebook and on our webpage. If you're interested in checking that out, it was really nicely done, and we're excited to have Wendy conclude her program today. Thank you.
Hi. Good morning. As she said, we're studying J. Sig Paulson's 13 Commandments. It's a very small book, but it's packed with a lot. And just a little bit back on him, he was a Unity minister for many, many years. He was the Unity minister at Unity Village. He traveled the world for Unity. He wrote many, many books. And I was surprised how few people had heard about him and how little they had on the net about him. But I put him up there with Eric Butterworth. He's just like a contemporary of his, and very similar and powerful. We're going to do the same thing, kind of hold questions and comments till the end. There's a lot of material to go through here, and to try to go through this book in 2 weeks takes quite a bit. So we're going to just go through because it's so important, I think. Again, you know, whether the biblical story of Moses is an actual factual representation of something that happened, or whether it was told as a story to teach the people, or a version of both. The Ten Commandments, the story of the Ten Commandments, where Moses leads the children out of bondage from Egypt, and then he brings them out, and then he goes up to speak with God to find out how they should live when they're out of bondage, how to live. And he gets that information, but by the time he's come down, the people are right back in bondage again. They've created their own version of bondage, something to worship, you know, and so he just, in the story, he gets mad and breaks them and then goes and gets some other ones. But I see this story as like us. When we're in bondage, then we find somebody or something that begins to lead us out of bondage. We may find a teacher or some kind of truth that begins to lead us out of bondage, and then we go back into bondage again. We find some form of bondage again. And when we're in bondage, then we need the Ten Commandments to live by. We need the thou shalt nots. We need something that controls us. But in J. Sig Paulson's book, now he doesn't say this is my belief, is that this would be the original ones that he comes down the mountain with. And if the people had been ready for it, this is what the world would have used to follow the God and stay out of bondage. And he has 13, what he calls commandments. The way I look at it is there were the 10 commandments, and what J. Sig Paulson is doing in this is he's taking the commandments and he's turning them into the principles for God consciousness, living God consciousness. Again, my idea. And the very last one, the 13th, I thought had 2 good ideas in it, so I turned it into 14. So, which is what we do, you know, it's what we do. When we study, we bring our own self to what we study. And so, anyway, to recap, the most important, the very, very most important God consciousness is the very first God consciousness. Everything is predicated upon that. And if you listen to this and you don't believe this and it doesn't mean anything to you, you know, might be a nice time to go wash your dishes, because none of this is going to have much meaning for you. But the very first God consciousness is there is one perfect, all-knowing, all-powerful, ever-present God whose will is good for all. And and whose spirit is fully present in every heart and mind, and fully present as us. As us. And everything that we're going to study from now on is to support that idea. And what Paulson believes is what Jesus taught. The kingdom is within us, and the Father and I are one with Jesus, that we're the one with the Father. Everything that Jesus did, we could do, that we have been given this creative power to come here and practice that power in our lives here. And by knowing this and looking back at this, coming back to this every time, and then making our choices based on this truth. And every choice we make, if we weigh it against this statement about who God is and who we are, and say, so if this statement is true, can this be true? It's not confusing. Since I've been studying this for about a month now, preparing for this and then getting in that, and I've been practicing it. And I don't know how many times I've been doing something that in the past I could have justified going there, but when I weighed it against this truth, it was like, why go there? It's immaterial. That's a useless thought, a useless place to go. So then God consciousness number 2 is basically that this spirit of good resides in everyone and everything. It is our true nature. God consciousness number 3, we consciously accept and practice the great eternal creative privilege of the name God, which is I am, to bring forth into manifestation only the true nature of God, the good, in ourselves and in all creation. So every time I go, you are this, I am literally engaging the power of creation in that moment, that in my life, you will show up to me like that, or you won't show up to me. If I say, this country is this, the country can only show up that way for me. And so to take the name of God in vain is to take it in a way that I don't want. That's all. Real simple. Number 4, keeping the Sabbath is in the holy stillness. We relax and know that God is mighty in the midst of us. God is the reality of our being, and God's good is our true self. And it's interesting because I've been practicing this, just practicing the presence, being that, not trying to think the right thought to be that. I've realized how little I do that, or how it's not natural. And I've been studying these things since '89, but just being in the presence, not to accomplish something or learn something. And it's been interesting, and I'm getting better. I'm getting better at just doing that, at just being there. Number 5, that had to do with our parents, honoring our parents. God consciousness is we see everyone as the Spirit of God, of good, and they are freely and naturally coming into ever great and more wonderful expression. And any of the past stuff that I hold on to about anybody, I can't do that and follow that. My parents are not my parents. God is my parent. God is their parent. And they never had power over me, nor should I ever have thought they did. Never have given them that. My only duty to my parents is the same duty that I have to everybody, and that is to be an expression of God's love. And anything else is not going to give me the life I want. Just plain and simple. Number 6, we support life in ourselves and all others by looking for our true godlike nature. So that's instead of thou shalt not kill. is that we're not going to kill the spirit of anybody anymore either. It's not just not killing the body. Number 7, committing adultery. The God consciousness for that is we choose to acknowledge and express the fullness of God's good in every aspect of our life. We are no longer going to adulterate or make our life less than the powerful goodness of God and our nature. Okay, so today we're going to start with number 8, which is the commandment that was given is thou shalt not steal. And what a happy commandment this is. It releases us from the burdensome belief in possessions and reminds us that every joy and blessing in our lives comes directly from our personal relationship with God. Once we fully understand that everything belongs to God. Now remember, if we are the full expression of God, that means everything belongs to us, individually as well. And we have been given the limitless inheritance of God's kingdom. So we no longer need to hoard. We don't have to have more. Because if you think about it, if I can have anything I want, why do I need to have a whole bunch of possessions in order to be something more or in order to feel safe or any of those things? It's mine. And I have to say, I have practiced this for many, many, many years. And I cannot tell you the hundreds of times that I have said, Sue wants me to do this meditation. It's a little bit of a challenge. Universe, send me a big, nice rocking chair I can put out on my back porch and rock to do these meditations for this class. And the next day, there's 2 big plastic, brand new rocking chairs sitting on the side of the road with a free sign on them. Again, hundreds of times, because I know everything that God has is mine. I can have anything I want. So we will then freely, from that knowledge that nothing of God is being held back, we're gonna give freely from that knowledge. Through faith, we recognize that every blessing we currently experience does not belong to us alone. It belongs to everyone and can never really be taken or given away. It can only be shared. Amazingly, as we freely share our blessings, we open ourselves even more to an awareness. We can never open ourselves more to God's abundance because that's given 100%. But we open ourselves more to an awareness of the never-ending supply of God's abundance. And my husband and I just testified to that in so many ways. I could tell you hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stories of how that has worked in our life. So the God consciousness for commandment number 8, we're now in God consciousness number 8. We love to share in the abundant flow of God's love, which belongs to everyone. Our divine nature freely and joyously gives and receives. So next is commandment number 9, thou shalt not bear false witness. Okay. So, well, the way I see it, we go back to God consciousness number 1, and it's not just about telling a lie about the God of appearance. Okay, remember we talked the God of appearance is one of the false gods that we're not supposed to be worshiping. So, if we're going to bear witness to the truth that God the good is the only power and presence in every person in every situation, anything other than that is false witness. Anything. So we are spirit, which is eternal, immortal, whole, rich, strong. You can go on with adjectives there. We all have within us the power of God, the power of love, the power of life, and the power to transform anything. Our thoughts, emotions, words, and responses to life which create our reality are expressions of the power of God. We will recognize that any expression which is less than godlike is a powerless, fruitless lie, which requires no further attention. We don't, the tendency and it is for us to explain why it's not good. And the Abraham teachers, which is the door in which I came into metaphysics, and so many of them keep saying, Abraham says, if you try to justify, rationalize, or explain something that you don't want, you are always in resistance, and resistance is that which keeps you from what you want. So again, it's again reaffirming that that's the truth. So we can trust God's good and know that God trusts us. There are no boundaries to our spirit or the good that we are bringing into expression. So commandment number 9 turns into God consciousness number 9. We testify to the unlimited, strong, free, whole goodness in every aspect of God that we call life. We consciously seek the divine nature, the perfection of God's love, and the perfection of God's love in everything. And we will know that we're doing it because when we do, we feel joy. It brings joy. So the last commandment, which is commandment 10, thou shalt not covet, is such a pretty simple one once you've come to this point, because what is left to covet once we know that we literally inherit the full power of God? We can create and experience anything we desire. Nothing has been withheld from us. For our contribution to eternal life is unique, and that's the wonderful gift that we have to give to life, is our uniqueness, bringing our full self. Anita Majani said after she had her near-death experience and then came back totally healed from cancer, that's one of the biggest things that she brought back, is she said, that is truly the greatest thing that you have to give to life and to give to everyone, is your absolute, unique, authentic self. That's your gift, guys. So if that's our gift, why do we want to be somebody else? Why do we want to covet who they are and be less than who we are? And it says, although we share similar manifestations with others, our highest goal unfolds from our own consciousness and is revealed by the Holy Spirit within. Knowing that God's nature for good is flowing through us, we trust our own inner guidance, which holds the design, work, and purpose of our creation. From this understanding, we become neither a conformist nor a nonconformist. We cease to condemn the viewpoint of any other person or organization. Likewise, we stop trying to force or coerce anyone into conforming to our beliefs or into traveling our spiritual path, even if they're trying to force us to follow theirs. We honor the freedom that God has entrusted to each of us as we look within to find direction and receive answers. And I know in my own life and my own experiences, I've begun to practice this, that when I look within, at first I didn't trust anything that was in me. Everything, all good seemed to be outside of me. Matter of fact, for many, many years, when I would go to a therapist, I would say, if it was like those old movies, in Japan movies, and Godzilla's coming, and that if anybody knew the true inner me, they would be running like all the people running from Godzilla the monster, So, but as I continued to practice this, even though I felt like there was nothing good within and that there just was a monster, slowly the monster began to fade, and I found that, wow, I found the good. I learned to love me. So So when we come to thou shalt not covet, the commandment, we turn it into God consciousness. My life, my work, and all of my daily activities are part of God's original plan for good. I know the happy, joyous freedom of thinking, speaking, and acting from that living connection. And I release all others to their own divine relationship. So now we move into the out of the commandment stage completely. And by that time, if you've studied those and we're beginning to use them at all, your consciousness is beginning to change. And in his book, J.C. Paulson basically says that he got the first two God consciousness. Now that's not his word, that's mine. Okay, he still called them commandments. But the God consciousness, the first two he got from the study of Jesus, and the last one he got from his own experience, and then, like I say, I added one more from my experience. So God consciousness number one is God is forever now. And so God is forever leading me in this new moment. I do not have to look to old conditions or past responses as the key for my current experience of God. God is forever new and unfolding through the guidance of my inner spirit of wisdom and love. Every moment is a time of new understanding from this current experiential base. What was will no longer be an arena for debate. We neither negate nor continue to reiterate old understanding. Instead, we awaken to our God-given responsibility, our ability to respond in this moment, with the full power of God behind that I am. Remember, that's who we are. We recognize that we have the power to change our conditions. We no longer blame anything or anyone. We see from a larger perspective. We see the beauty of our own part in God, in and as God. We realize that God has never lost sight of who we really are, and we weep with joy when we understand that God trusts us enough to set us free. We give wholehearted thanks that our God nature allows us the freedom of eternal, moment-by-moment creation. So there is never a time when you make a choice and now you've made your bed and you've got to lie in it. Because in the next moment, you can create a new bed. And in the next moment, a new bed. So that fear, I've heard a lot of times people say, be careful what you wish for. Be careful what you think of. When you first come into these things, there's that feeling of, oh my gosh, I got to control my thoughts. And if you're creating a new in each moment, and you have that power to change anything in the next moment, you don't have to be afraid of this power. You don't have to be afraid of who you are. And the other aspect is I'm creating my experience and everybody else is creating their experience. And although we come together at times and might share parts of that experience, never can I take away another person's power. I can make them believe that I'm the one that has power, maybe. They can make themselves believe that I'm the one that has power and thereby live that. But never can I take it, ever could I own it. Okay, God consciousness number 2. I give myself completely to the Spirit of God within. When I first heard that, there was a part of me that was kind of like, am I ready to give my life to God? Am I ready to give up those things that I love, those things that I want, and give it up so that I can serve God? And the thing that I found over these many years of studying this, I was in a 12-step group one time, and a girl in there, they were talking about turning your will over to God. And there was a young girl, and she said, I don't know that this is true, but I'm not sure that my God, my will, and God's will are not the same. I think they're the same. And when she said that, it was so powerful. It was like being hit by lightning when she said that. And over the years, I began to know more and more that my will and God's will are not the same. And if we go back to commandment number 1, that says one of the false gods is the little self, as if we have some ego or we have something within us, some consciousness, subconsciousness, some drive, something that is against God and against us. That's a false god. That's one of the false gods. And as I begin to live from a place that goes, my will and God's will are in harmony. My will and God's will are in harmony. I can trust my will. That the things that call to me, the things that make me excited, the things that I want to do are God's wills too. And when I have begun to live from that and trust that, oh my gosh, amazing things happen. And I truly have experienced that my will and God's will are one. So if I remember that I am the temple of God, and I begin to accept the new edict from this of thou shalt love, and begin by loving the Spirit of God in me and as my will and as the uniqueness of me, and I commit myself mentally and emotionally and spiritually and physically and in every way to that inner relationship, then I begin to no longer identify myself as just a human being, weak and subservient. And I begin to identify myself as a spiritual being filled with the presence of and equipped with the divine nature of God. And I look through different eyes, and I change my response to life from that inner connection of peace and joy. And it's not something that you have to force yourself to do, because as you continue to do that more and more and more, you reach a place of absolute love. And I at one time used to, when I looked in the mirror, I literally saw a monster in the mirror. And all I wanted to do was destroy that monster that I saw. And now I see God staring back at me. I see God staring back at me, because that's who is in the mirror. Every one of us, when we look in the mirror, it's God looking back at you. So then God consciousness number 3 is once I recognize that and give myself to the Spirit of God within, that's owning myself as that God nature, then I shall love the Spirit of God in my neighbor. So once I've learned of my oneness with the goodness of God, it just follows that I'm going to want to include everyone. But it is not dependent on the actions of others or any action on my part to change them. But I can only experience the God in others to the degree that I see it and share it. I do that by seeing the Spirit of God and the good within him or her. And to be loving is not to be wishy-washy, but it is to stand firm and expect and encourage my neighbor to live up to the truth that I know in my heart and my mind, regardless of any appearance. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to be a preacher to them, telling them what they should do. It's not about me informing them or, again, trying to get them to change or do anything. But it's about me when I see another person and I think a thought here, then I take that thought and I weigh it against commandment number 1. And if it does not support commandment number 1 in the nature of God, then I say, that's not my neighbor. That's not my neighbor. That's some false god or some false idea. I'm done with that. All I want to see there is what it says in commandment number 1, or in God consciousness number 1. So my work is to remind myself throughout the day of my deep and unshakable love for the Spirit of God in everyone. Amazingly, my changing attitude toward another person often seems to change that person and their reaction toward me. Nevertheless, I will always remember that my purpose is never to change that other person. My purpose is simply to be and experience God's love. That's the purpose. I don't do anything to get anything, because if I'm doing it, if I'm living from that truth and who I am getting everything in the moment I'm living who I truly am. And there's nothing more I need them to give me, because I'm already there, which I already was before I ever did anything. Okay. So God consciousness number 4. Let's see, did I do God consciousness number 1? Yeah, okay, so God consciousness number 4. And this one, I kind of separate this one from the Spirit, loving the Spirit of God, because it kind of talked, initially that loving the Spirit was to freely demonstrate it. But I thought it was important for me to have that be a total separate one. And so God consciousness 4 is I freely choose to demonstrate the Christ within. I am a vessel of the Christ. Now, if you don't identify with the Christian, I'm going to use the word mythology, not because I'm saying it didn't happen, but each one of us is creating the stories about that in our own lives. So that if that's not the story that you identify with, to begin to see God, and I think that for many of us, Jesus was one of the first examples where we could see God in a human form, see God expressing God's love expressing in a human form. And so we use the term, I use the term Christ when I think it's Jesus the Christ, not Jesus last name Christ. And so the Christ is that true nature. It's a name for the true nature of God within all of us. So I am Wendy the Christ, and Dawn the Christ, and Susan the Christ. And so when I recognize that I am a vessel of the Christ, the Godness, the fullness, I love my neighbor for the joy of it, not from a sense of duty. I do things for my neighbor for the joy of it, the joy of being who I am. I love because I am love, and I free all men to the guidance of the Christ within them, whether they call it Christ or whether they call it Buddha or Atman or whatever. And I rejoice in their unique unfoldment. In this state, commandments are no longer necessary or relevant. I am no longer motivated by something outside of myself. Everything that I do flows from my desire to love, to be love. And Jesus said, if ye keep my commandments, ye shall abide in my love, even as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. And so now I would say, even as we keep God's consciousness in our minds, we abide in God's love. We abide as God's love. So Jesus said, these things I have spoken unto you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be made full. So in the very beginning, Paulson said what he was writing this book for is he believed that it was possible for heaven to be here on earth. He believed that there was a way, and he believed that looking at these commandments and making these shifts to see them at what I call God consciousness, if we did that in our lives, we literally could live in heaven on earth. And for me, it kind of is a personal thing, because many, many years ago, when I came into this world, probably the first 40 years of my life, my greatest desire, my prayer every night was that God would kill me, let me out of here. I wanted out. And then I had experiences that led me to a place one day where, and it was through the Abraham teachings, where it literally dropped me to my knees when I went, oh my God, that's who we are. That's what this life is meant to be. That is who others are. That's who God is. And in that moment, I did not want to die anymore. Matter of fact, I loved this long, eternal, convoluted, beautiful thing called life. And in that moment that I saw that, I kind of, I went into this vision, and I went to this place, and it was like a conference of these wonderful, wonderful beings that just absolutely emitted love and loved me. And they said, what do you want to do next? This is one of the hurdles that I guess when we come into human form, we gain back our love for life somewhere along the way if we've lost it. And they said, if you're ready to go now, that's cool, but do you want to do something else? And I said, well, I've got so much knowledge, maybe I'll stay and play with it a little more here. And they said, well, and there was like this long hallway, and they said, you can go in any of these doors, but you could just go to the edge and jump off. And none of the doors felt right, so I jumped off at the edge. And the only thing that I remember seeing is I remember seeing a reality where there was no duality, that there was amazing creative life going on. And the only things I remember of it is that there would be a group of beings here that would be creating, and a group here. And if one from here decided they wanted to go here, there was no sense of loss. Like, oh my gosh, you're leaving, what are we going to do? It was just like that free movement between creative things. And I know the feeling of that, and I believe that was a vision of truly what it's like if we could live these commandments, living here in a world that the duality stuff would begin to fall away, and that the idea that we need bad to know good might not really be true. Might not really be true. So then the last thing that happened this week, when I am studying these things and stuff, a lot of times I will get dreams. And I told you my first dream about this last week. And but this week I had another dream. And in that dream, and my mother passed a few years ago and everything, but my mother had died, and I was taking care of her funeral, and I had problems with my kids, and my family was having problems, and the world was having problems. I was just immersed in trouble and problems. And I got in my car, and I was driving home to get a little rest from these problems. And I was on the freeway, and a police pulled me over. And he said, you need to get out and walk up there half a mile up to there, and there's a policeman up there that will tell you what to do. The shoulder was blocked, so you couldn't walk on the shoulder, so you had to walk on the freeway. So I walked a half a mile, got up there, and there was another police officer, and he said, I am giving you a ticket because you are committing a moving violation on the freeway. You are not wearing your seatbelt. So the policeman gave me a ticket, and then he said, now you need to go up there a little ways to the next guy. Next policeman. And I went to the next policeman, and the next policeman said, due to COVID, our city is low on funds, and so we are fining everybody, I can't remember, a large sum of money. And I'm giving you a ticket for that fine because you live in our city. I was furious. And think about your own self as you're listening to there. If any, that rising. And I was furious. And I said, I want your names, I want your badges. I'm going around and getting the names of all the people that you're doing, because they were doing it to a lot of people. I'm getting all the people, we are coming after you, we are going to, and I was so mad that it woke me up. And I had to go to the bathroom, so I went in there, and I'm sitting, and I am just so mad. And now I'm thinking about some pet peeves I have with the city now, and I'm starting to think about that, and I am just so mad. And I felt, it's like I just wanted to go back to bed, and I did not want to get up, and I did not want to face this horrible, bad world. And I was sitting there, and it's just kind of like, you go, I hope nobody's looking. I'm so stupid. I hope nobody's looking. You know that feeling? This was a dream. This was a dream. And I'm so caught up in the badness of this dream that it's ruining my life today. And I made a decision that I was going to go back to bed and change my dream. And I went back to bed, and I went into the dream, and I took God consciousness number 1, and I said, you guys need money. The city needs money. How much do you need? Let me write you a check. And I said, and all the people that were there, how much do you want to give? We love our city, don't we? Let's do this. And we ordered pizza and party things, and we had someone got a guitar out of their thing and some stuff, and we all started dancing on the freeway, and we had a party, and we raised enough money for our city, way enough for not only the things that they wanted to do, but all of the things when I was sitting on the toilet that I was thinking our city should do, especially for the homeless. And it was just like, and then I thought about it, and when I woke up the next time, I thought about it. And how many times do we let the dream of this life interfere with the trueness, the true world, the true place that we live with God and with each other, stand in the way of our happiness and creating what we want? It's just a dream, guys. Duh. And, it's okay if we're looking at each other when we have that dream, because I've had it enough. But I'm getting really tired of it. And one of my goals, again, I jumped off that precipice for my next adventure, is to live in that dream. And practicing of these principles, even not nearly at this level for these past 30-odd years, has taken this world and changed it so profoundly for me in so many ways that I know it's just another step to get to that next place. So, I've talked and talked and talked. Now it's your guys' turn. If you have any questions or comments about any experiences that you've had that might be similar, questions about how to do this, whatever comes to mind.
It seems to me that we've had a real treat this morning, because I know the story that Wendy just told, and I know it's true because I've seen it happen over the last 20 plus years. That the transformation that's occurred has been absolutely phenomenal. She has a display up here of pictures that portray each one of the 8 to 12 commandments, or she likes to call them God consciousnesses. And so I welcome you to look at
Are
them.
you ready to show them all?
I could, if are there more comments or anything that... So the first time that I read this book was about 20 years ago, and then I studied again in 2008, and one of the ways that I learn is I make very visual, and I draw what I'm doing, and I condense. If you read a chapter and you condense that chapter into a few paragraphs, is a real good way to hold it. So this is commandment number 8. Thou shalt not steal. Of course, we love to share the abundant flow of God's love, which belongs to everyone. And then commandment 9, thou shalt not bear false witness, is we testify to the unlimited, strong, free, whole goodness in every aspect of God that we call life. And thou shalt not covet. Wait a minute. Put that.
This one's thou shalt not covet.
Let's see. No, that's it. This one is.
Okay.
Okay, so thou shalt not covet. Just let me find the paper here. I have the. My life, my work, and all of my daily activities are part of God's original plan for good. So this coveting is just basically that everything starts at the center and comes out from the center. There's nothing to covet. There's just nothing to covet. That's how I saw it. Which one's different? And God is forever now. That one's just pretty simple. And I give myself completely to the Spirit of God within. And then I shall love the Spirit of God in my neighbor. And then I thought of something to do for the Christ within, and you get these papers for this size and everything, and there was nothing that exemplified that more than just that. So I just kept that as the last one. One time, long before, if there's anybody that has any comments or anything, feel free to do that, but I'll just share. Many, many years ago, long before metaphysics came into my life, I had a grandmother who she had promised my grandfather that she would never cut her hair. So she had hair longer than mine, and I would go once a week and I would wash her hair and I would put it in curlers at the top, and then I would do it up in a French twist for her to have for the rest of that week, so I'd spend the night. And I did that for about 15 years, every week. And one time when I was doing her hair, I was standing there doing her hair, and unbidden, a feeling came over me that I was in a place of absolute contentment, bliss. I could have stayed in that moment for eternity, happily in that moment for eternity. And I can't tell you how long it lasted. My grandmother never noticed me going away into that moment, so it couldn't have lasted too long. But it felt like it lasted for eternity. And after it happened, I wanted it again. I wanted it again. And it didn't seem like there was any way. And as I began to practice metaphysics, there were a couple times when that moment came through a practice. But in this past month, as I have been going back to God Consciousness 1 in just almost everything that I've been doing, I have had that moment many times. Even just in this past month of just doing a little practice with this, just of going into that. And I also have, there are times, things that would have, I practice these principles and I've been very serious about it and I greatly love them. And And even after 30 years, it sometimes feels like I'm kind of still just balancing to keep doing it, and I have to be really conscious and really, really aware. And one of the things that I noticed in this past month is the only criteria is what I'm thinking or what I'm doing, is it God consciousness number one? And if it's not, quit it. I don't want to do this anymore. It's not interesting. I don't want to do that. I don't care how much Dawn's to blame. Yeah. Or how true this is. Or how desperately someone doesn't understand me. It doesn't matter. Susan.
Well, a while back when you were talking about, I think it was God consciousness number 13, we shall love the Spirit of God in our neighbor, and you were making a hand movement while you were doing it, and it looked sort of like this, and it came to me that basically that was infinity. We were just doing the two sides individually instead of doing this. And I thought that was very cool because together we create eternity or infinity.
Exactly. So one of the interesting things that has been happening is that one of the false gods, if you remember again, is that false god of the little self. It's believing that there is some mental deficiency or some ego deficiency inside. And it has been very interesting because I really, really, really want to explain my life through that false god. A lot of practice in learning. I probably could hold a degree in psychology. And how indoctrinated I have become in psychology, the idea. And every time that I start to go there again to find that as the answer to what's happening, I just have to go, no, there is no subconscious. There is no part of me that is not the fullness of that is spoken of in God consciousness number one. And it's been interesting as I've let go of that, trying to explain it from that point of view and going there. It's just kind of melts away. And I have to admit that I am, it is an interesting journey, even just during this last month, that I'm not exactly sure how one is going to relate to this world and to other people in any real practical way. However, if the God consciousness number one, remember, it's not just a principle, it is a promise also. And if that promise that the kingdom is within and heaven is here on earth, if that promise is true, and if any of this is true, then even though I can't see how we can live together from that perspective, I believe somewhere inside me that it can be, and that will unfold along the way if I choose to do this, if it's something that I continue. Al?
Well,
Just a minute. You're gonna get a.
I got to feel kind of loving a little while ago, and finally I got to thinking, well, I do love my kids, and I guess I love my kids as friends, and this kept going and going, until all at once I got to the migrants that are coming in over the border down south. And I've been mad at them for ages, but I finally coughed out, yeah, I guess I love them too.
I think most of us come from migrant people who came here from another country across the border.
When I finally got, so yeah, I guess I love them too.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate this opportunity. Remember that any of us have the option to come here and share something that has meaning to us, whether it's a book, whether it's a metaphysical idea, something that speaks to our spiritually, to share with the group. And Paul Day isn't here today, but he's the one to talk to. I understand about that. And thank you so much. And I'll turn it over to Brandy.
And y'all, we're so lucky to have Wendy Fredrickson here as a teacher for us, and I'm just so gratified to always be able to learn from her. She also is one of the co-leaders of the Abraham Hicks Meditation Group that meets on Saturday mornings at 9:30 if you're interested in attending that. Some of our announcements, as you guys know, it's getting cold out there. Our cold weather crisis shelter is expected to be open the next 8 to 10 days. And that means that we are going to be short on supplies, and we're also going to get short on volunteers. So if there are some ways that you can help out, please do so. If you have a question about volunteering, please talk to me. Our volunteer coordinator has it so well organized, and I'm not someone that can do any of the physical aspects of getting it set up or taking care of it, but I am able to be awake at night and sit here with volunteers. And we'll have 2 overnight volunteers, and we take turns taking a nap. So it's not completely onerous on any one person. Other ways you can help out is helping with sanitation in the mornings, getting everything, sheets and towels, or sheets and pillowcases taken over for the laundry. Then we sanitize all the cots and the pillows and everything, and get the bathrooms all cleaned up and everything for the church. So there's a bunch of different ways to pitch in. And as always, these people get here kind of hungry, and we offer hot cocoa and coffee and tea and snacks, and we're always very welcoming of any donations for that, as well as large-sized shoes, skinny-sized jeans for men, and coats and blankets. Other things that we have going on tonight at 6, we have the LGBTQIA group and the Allies is meeting. Reverend Pat McClelland is doing a book study, continuing the Crossing the Bridgeless Canyon. Also tomorrow is Martin Luther King Day, and Unity of Springfield is joining with Faith Voices of Southwest Missouri in the Martin Luther King March. We'll be meeting at the ice park there over at Jordan Valley about 8:30 to 8:45 in the morning. We'll be walking that half mile between there and the square, and there'll be a short program. So we invite anybody that's interested to join us. You'll be able to find us with the Unity banner. Our mat weaving is ongoing, and that'll be meeting on Thursday at 12:30. And next week's class is going to be taught by James Masters, and his topic is the voice of God. Finally, we also have a meeting coming up to organize Planet Unity's Earth Day, and our annual meeting is January 30th. This is a really important one to come to. There'll be a presentation from the board, and we will also be electing 3 new board members, or re-electing some board members. If you're interested in running, applications are in the office. Thank you.